Послушайте. Слышите? Шепот, быть может, шорох забытого шелка, но куда старше самих камней, что держит этот зал. Это ропот древних стен, отягощенных тайнами, которых не смеет коснуться солнце, тайнами создания и разрушения целой династии. Они говорят о покорителе, понимаете? О владыке, чья тень, темная и необъятная, падала на 3 континента, подчиняя народы своей железной воле. И все же, даже такой титан был обречен покориться сам. Не громом воюющих армий, не блеском клинка соперника. Нет. Его падение было куда более тонким, более коварным, вплетенным в самые гобелены его позолоченной темницы, сильным, как любой яд. Именно здесь, за этой богато украшенной, безмолвной колонной, куда свет едва проникает, дышит правда. Правда слишком опасная для пера любого писца, слишком мощная для языка любого придворного. Взгляните внимательнее на мимолетные очертания. Тени танцуют, меняются на полированном мраморе, намекая на скрытые лица, на завуалированные намерения. Это не было полем битвы, но безжалостная игра королев, сыгранная не сталью, а волей, шепотом, за саму душу короля. Внезапный, резкий звон, далекий, но отзывающийся эхом, быть может, забытая цепь в глубокой темнице или торжественный удар церемониального гонга в каком-то древнем забытом крыле, разбивает тишину, чтобы тут же быть поглощенным еще более глубокой, более всеобъемлющей тишиной. Тишиной, беременной невысказанными указами, выборами, что пройдут сквозь века. И вот символ. Одна единственная блестящая капля чернил, черная как полночь, падает на нетронутый свиток. Она растекается, медленно, неумолимо, по девственной поверхности. Невысказанное решение, принятое не словами, а молчаливым, неизгладимым пятном. Выбор, который навсегда перекроит путь целой кровной линии, выкованной в предательстве, запечатанной в этой удушающей тишине. Он, владевший землями и жизнями без меры, оказался владыкой всего, кроме своего собственного коварного сердца. Это, моя дорогая, история о том, как человек, покоривший мир, в конце концов был безвозвратно покорен одной девушкой. He rode, and the earth trembled. His saber, forged in the fires of 1,000 battles, did not merely cut, it carved new destinies from the ancient world, dividing empires as easily as a merchant parts silk. His name, a guttural whisper of power, was carried on the winds from the scorching sands of the south to the frozen rivers of the north, shaking thrones from their very foundations. Kings, once mighty, bowed their heads, their bloodlines mere footnotes in the saga of his endless conquests. The world, vast and defiant, learned to hold its breath when his banners unfurled, when the thunder of his cavalry echoed across the plains. This man, a force of nature cloaked in steel and ambition, was the storm that swept across continents, leaving behind a new order, written in the annals of glory and the bitter ink of defeat. But behind those bronze gates, beneath the gilded arches of his imperial palace, a different kind of storm was brewing. Not of steel and cavalry, but of silence and shadow. A storm born not from the roar of legions, but from the quiet, calculating depths of a young mind. She was a chuzhezemka, a foreigner, a captive from a distant land where the trees grew wild and the sun beat down on simple, homespun lives. She knew no silk then, only the coarse touch of linen against her skin, the scent of soil under her bare feet. She arrived, a fragile echo among hundreds, a nameless girl with no bloodline to speak of, no legacy but the emptiness of her stolen past. A shadow, tossed into a golden cage, a glittering prison where beauty was a commodity and survival a silent, daily war. Look closely, I implore you. See the stark truth of it. On the floor of her chamber, cast aside like a forgotten dream, lies a rough, hand-woven cloth, perhaps a remnant from her journey, a stolen memory of home. And beside it, glistening under the soft lamplight, a magnificent caftan of shimmering Bursa silk, embroidered with threads of gold, a gift from the very hands that had enslaved her. Two worlds clashing in the intimate space of her room, her past, humble and raw, against her present, opulent and perilous. Her battlefield was not the dusty plain where empires rose and fell by the edge of a blade. Her arena was the velvet cushions of the harem, the whispering corridors, the treacherous, perfumed air where every glance held a hidden meaning, every word a potential poison. Her weapon was not a sharpened scimitar, but a mind honed by observation, a spirit forged in the crucible of loss. She learned to read the subtle shifts in the gaze of a concubine, the fleeting tremor in the voice of an eunuch, the unspoken language of power and desperation that governed this gilded world. She understood that here, the true strength lay not in brute force, but in the intricate dance of influence, in the careful cultivation of favor, in the silent, ruthless game of queens. He conquered the world with his sword, but she, a mere slave, began to conquer the world within his walls, not with steel, but with the quiet power of her intellect. A fragile life, yet one destined to challenge the very foundations of his dynasty. What power, I ask you, does a conqueror truly wield when the quietest heart holds the key to his very bloodline? The shadow of her past, once her burden, now became her unseen armor. The silence, her most potent ally. And the silk, once a symbol of her captivity, slowly, deliberately, began to transform into the banner of her quiet rebellion. This, my friends, is where the true conquest begins. From this shadowed vantage, where centuries of dust cling to the marble, I have watched the bloodline's relentless march. I have seen empires rise and fall, the whisper of poison beneath the silk. And I tell you, my dear, traditions here are older than the very stones, unbreakable as mountain spines. They dictate every breath, every glance, every tremor within these walls. No slave, no concubine, no woman of the harem, however favored, dared to meet the Sultan's eye, not truly as an equal. Her place was submission, her gaze lowered, her will a mere echo of his. This was the unspoken law, etched deeper than any decree. A law, they believed, to protect the dynasty's very fabric. Yet, in that vast chamber, where the air hummed with his undisputed authority, something shifted. A breath held too long, a flicker of light. Her name, I cannot speak it yet, but her presence, it was an unspoken challenge. For she did not lower her eyes. As the conqueror of worlds, the Sultan rose, his gaze, accustomed to bending nations, swept the chamber. And it landed on her. And then it happened. A silence descended, heavier than any shroud. So profound, it swallowed the city's distant cries, the rustle of rich fabrics, the very beating of one's own heart. Her eyes, those pools of defiant darkness, did not flinch. They met his. Not with terror, not with supplication, but with a searing, unyielding intensity that pierced the thick hide of centuries-old expectations. What did he see, this man who had bent the world to his will? No slave, no possession. He saw not a woman seeking permission, but a soul demanding recognition. A will forged in fire, as potent and unyielding as his own. A mirror reflecting a power he had never anticipated in such a vessel. It was a challenge, not to his crown, but to the very architecture of his worldview. A forbidden intimacy, illuminated not by a candle, but by the furious blaze of two colliding universes. In that unbearable stillness, unspoken words, heavy with the weight of destiny, passed between them. A silent dialogue, more potent than any declaration of war. And in that exchange, my dear, you could almost hear them crack, the ancient walls. The traditions, once solid as granite, began to crumble, grain by imperceptible grain. For in her eyes, he saw not the future he desired, but the future she demanded. And for the first time, the conqueror of worlds felt tremors of a conquest he had not initiated, a surrender he had not foreseen. The seal on the old world, it was broken in that instant. A new decree, written not in ink but in fire, was being forged. The game, once played with familiar rules, had irrevocably changed. And all it took was a single, unforgivable gaze. From behind this very pillar, where the dust of centuries settles like a silent witness, I have seen the true chronicle of empires etched not in parchment, but in blood. The ink of a dynasty, my dear friends, is always crimson. Here, in these gilded chambers, a new chapter began to bleed onto the grand tapestry. She, a girl whose hands once knew only the rhythm of a spindle, began to grasp the silken threads of fate, threads that would soon tighten around necks, unseen. The harem, a gilded cage of ambition, had once mocked her. Laughter, whispers like poisoned air followed her every step. Women of pedigree and established favor saw only a foreign blossom, fragile and out of place. But the echoes of those taunts began to fade. One by one, those who stood in her sun, those whose bloodlines conferred unassailable right, began to vanish. Like smoke kissed by the wind, gone. A sudden fever, a stumble on a darkened stair, a quiet drowning in slumber. The court, well versed in the language of power, understood the new grammar being written in the silence. Do you truly believe a woman, cornered and fighting for her very breath, for her children's future, would hesitate? There was no poison not considered, no shadow that did not learn to conceal a blade. A sherbet cup, shimmering in the amber light of a setting sun, might carry a sweetness that lingered too long, or a bitter aftertaste that stole away tomorrow. A discarded silk scarf, once a token of beauty and favor, might be the only trace left of a woman who simply ceased to be. The air grew heavy with unspoken fears, and the very walls seemed to hold their breath, complicit. She was not sculpted from virtue, nor carved from malice. She was, above all, a survivor. A will forged in the cruel crucible of destiny, honed to a razor's edge. The consequences of her ascent, though often silent, were profound. The Sultan, the magnificent, conqueror of worlds, watched from his throne. His gaze, usually sweeping across battlefields and maps of dominion, now often settled on her, on the changes she wrought within his most sacred, most intimate domain. His world, a realm built on steel and fire, was reshaped not by an invading army, but by a subtler, more potent force. Was it guile that laid siege to his heart, or a passion so fierce it burned away all reason? Or perhaps, as is often the truth in these grand plays of dynasty and desire, it was both. A dance of intellect and raw emotion, played out with life and death as the stakes. The bloodline, a sprawling tree rooted in ancient soil, felt the tremor of a new gardener's hand, pruning with absolute intent. We, who watched from the shadows, knew this was merely the prelude. The true game, where stakes were not just lives, but the very soul of an empire, had only just begun. Listen closely, for the silence that follows a whisper often speaks louder than any decree. Они говорят об империях, построенных на стали, на громе бесчисленных копыт. И все же, из-за этих самых колонн, из безмолвного камня, что держит эти покои, шепчет более глубокая истина. Миром правят не всегда мечи и армии, мои дорогие дамы. Иногда достаточно лишь одного взгляда, одной хитрой мысли, посаженной как семя, одного шепота, легче шелка, но тяжелее султанского указа, находящего свою цель в тихие предрассветные часы. Трепета сомнения, намека на судьбу. Она не покоряла далекие берега, не стремилась окрасить новые территории кровью. Ее полем битвы было сердце, ее высшей наградой – сама душа того, кто покорил мир. И в этом тихом владычестве над столь необъятным духом заключалась ее самая грозная, самая неизбывная победа. Но прислушайтесь внимательно, ибо каждый триумф, выкованный из такого коварства, требует своей дани. Эта победа, это наследие, вплетенное в саму ткань династии, было оплачено тенями. В глубокой тишине, что цепляется за эти коридоры, тишине, которая помнит каждое предательство, каждое шепотливое обещание, каждую каплю невидимого яда. Тишина, что танцует до сих пор, жуткий балет последствий. Родословная, которую она выковала, гобелен амбиций и выживания, изменила само течение истории. Империя, некогда казавшаяся незыблемой, склонилась перед волей взгляда, ума, голоса, что осмелился бросить вызов самой судьбе. В этом, тогда, заключается неизменная истина игры королев. Жестокий балет воль, где ужасающий вес короны не просто несет тот, кто ее носит, но и все, кто вращается вокруг ее жестокого великолепия. Безмолвная война, ведущаяся с изяществом и хитростью, где власть меняется как песок, всегда ища нового хозяина, новый сосуд для своей бесконечной жажды. Посмотрите теперь, как гаснет последний свет, и эхо веков отступает. Одинокое пламя далекой свечи мерцает, его тени вытягиваются длинными и искаженными, словно ожившие призраки прошлого. Эти пустые залы, они ведь не совсем пусты, не так ли? Они пульсируют фантомным прикосновением шелка, lingering scent of ambition, шепотом тех, кто до сих пор ходит по этим тропам. Каждый камень — свидетель, каждая тень — воспоминание. Игра никогда не заканчивается по-настоящему.